Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
Lake Effect brings you conversations about what's happening in Milwaukee and the people, places, and organizations that shape our community. This is Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
For many people facing end-stage organ failure, a donated organ is their only life-saving option. But the waiting list is long, and finding the right organ match is incredibly difficult. In Wisconsin, it's becoming even more difficult, as more than 800 people have removed their names from the organ donation registry this year. Experts say misinformation about organ donation may be driving some of those removals. I'm joined now by two people who are trying to counter misinformation and share the benefits of becoming an organ donor. Dr. Nicole Neidlinger is a transplant surgeon and medical director of UW Organ and Tissue Donation. And Colleen McCarthy is the vice president of organ and tissue donation at Versity, Wisconsin. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Exactly. Thank you.
We are right now seeing a lot of people opting out of the registry. Just to clarify, are these people who might have signed up in the future but decided not to, or are these people who had initially signed up and decided, you know what, I'm not interested?
We are seeing across the country and in Wisconsin here a record number of people that are actively removing themselves from the registry. So at some point in time, these are people that had made that decision. They wanted to be an organ and tissue and eye donor. And they may have signed up at the DMV when they were renewing their driver's license, or potentially had signed up on the online registry. And as a result of some very concerning media stories, it has really created fear in Wisconsin and across the country. So we are seeing, as a result, people remove themselves based off of this growing fear.
Now, you mentioned a concerning media report. Can you expand on that a bit?
Sure. If I could go back a little bit and just talk a little bit about, how organ donation works. In the United States, there are 55 organ procurement organizations in the country. We are all federally designated. We're nonprofit, and our mission is the sole mission of organ and tissue donation and transplantation. It is our responsibility to support families that are in the middle of just immense grief and loss, and it is our responsibility to collaborate with the donor hospitals to support these families through their loss and offer them hope and healing through donation. So here in Wisconsin, there are two organ procurement organizations, UW, OTD, and Versity, and we all have hospitals that we support. And every single hospital has a responsibility to make sure that families get the option of organ donation if it is medically suitable. So both of our teams will work with our donor hospitals. We will receive referrals from hospitals. When a family and a hospital care team have decided that all efforts have been exhausted to save a life, and that the patient will no longer have a positive outcome, and the family's made the decision to withdraw care, then and only then do organ procurement organizations offer that option of donation to family if we believe there's medical suitability. And what we're seeing as a result of people removing themselves from the registry is a fear of organs being recovered before they should. And what we really want to stress to the public is that there are very clear safeguards in place. The hospital and the family are the ones that make that decision for their loved one. They have to make the decision if their loved one would want to live like this, what type of end-of-life care or even quality of care a patient would have, and only then after those difficult decisions have been made do we get involved. So that is the very first important safeguard to highlight.
Dr. Neidlinger, you're someone who works with people who need organ transplants. What is that like? What is the scale of the need right now?
I'm fortunate to do a job that I think is pretty miraculous every day. But the problem that we're facing is that there are not enough organs for everyone who need them. So in Wisconsin alone, there's about 1,200 people waiting on a kidney. Of the whole waiting list in the country, probably about 80% of the waiting list is people waiting on kidney transplants. And 13 people every day die across the nation waiting for an organ. Every 10 minutes or so, somebody new is added to the waiting list. So I think for these people who are waiting on organs, there's really no other option. They have end-stage organ failure. They're on dialysis, but dialysis too is a temporary solution. It's a really challenging quality of life for them. A lot of times people are hooked up to a machine 3 or 4 hours a day, 3 or 4 times a week. It really limits their ability to work and travel and spend time with loved ones. And their only solution is to have the altruism of somebody donating, an organ to them. And I sort of want to echo what Colleen was saying, is that it's the distrust in the health system that has arisen and that we've seen in these past couple of months is really devastating for the waitlisted people. The number of people removing themselves in the registry it really looks like a trend in the past couple of months, and almost as many people have removing themselves in the registry every month as people that are waiting for kidneys. So it's really a concerning challenge, especially for these folks that don't have a lot of other options.
What are some of these big misconceptions? You mentioned, of course, this fear that doctors are going to forego some kind of treatment on a loved one in order to take organs. Are there other fears around this idea of being on the registry?
That's a main one, but another one is also really understanding that organ donation does not occur until after death has happened and after death has been declared by a hospital physician, again, independent of the organ procurement organization. So I think these media stories have created this fear, people potentially believing that organs may be recovered prematurely, and that, again, is absolutely not accurate. This is another important safeguard in the donation system, is that organs are never recovered prior to a patient being declared dead.
If you're just tuning in, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers, and I'm speaking right now with Dr. Nicole Neidlinger. She is a transplant surgeon and medical director at UW Organ and Tissue Donation, as well as Colleen McCarthy, vice president of organ and tissue donation at Versity, Wisconsin. And we're talking about the surge in people removing their names from the organ donation list. Even if you're on the registry, that doesn't guarantee, of course, that you'll be able to donate. We had a colleague here on Lake Effect, Eiley, who tragically died in a car accident. She was a passionate supporter of organ donation, and she was lucky to be able to donate some of her organs. But that process did include keeping her on life support, a decision that was very difficult for her family. How often do you see these kinds of situations where someone might be very passionate about organ donation during their lives, but for one reason or another, they're unable to donate?
Organ donation is a very rare occurrence. In the United States, there are almost 3 million deaths every single year, but only 17,000 deceased organ donors. So it is just a very small fraction of people that could potentially become organ donors. And that's why every single donor, every single gift is so precious. And so when we're seeing people remove themselves based off of fear and misinformation, it is so concerning. And we appreciate and understand the incredible grief that these families are going through. You mentioned your friend, what her family went through at the hospital. It's devastating. We know these families are in crisis and they are in deep grief. And so it's our responsibility to these families to make sure that we uphold the integrity in the system, that we show compassion to these families as they begin to even just comprehend that they're losing a loved one. So the care that we give to these families in collaboration with hospitals, it absolutely essential. And we do that to make sure that these safeguards are in place. The hospital exhausts all efforts to save a life. That is the primary goal. That is 100% the primary goal. And only when that is exhausted is organ donation potentially considered.
Dr. Neidlinger, I have to imagine that working with people who need an organ can be difficult. What is that like? What is it like working with someone who's waiting on the list for potentially years, depending on what the need is?
As you see these folks coming in clinic and they're describing sort of how their health has deteriorated and the ways that they're limited in their organ failure, you see almost just a desperation and a hope in them that as a physician, like we can impact this, but we just really rely on altruism of the general public. And it's a really moving experience too, I'll say, when you get to notify somebody, the organ you've been waiting on for months, years has finally arrived. So it's a rewarding job when we get to do it, but the limitations and what people are facing when they're coming into clinic, and you have to explain to them that, especially based on criteria like tissue matching and blood type, like they may be waiting a long time for an organ is pretty devastating. And one of the things that I think is really important to mention is that we also get to do in this job is that you get to go on organ procurements. And I often tell the story because I remember it when I first started doing training. It was about almost 20 years ago now. And it was one of my first times ever going on an organ procurement. And my boss at the time told me that when I got to the hospital where this poor young person had passed away and their family was there at the bedside grieving, he said, one of the things you're going to do when you get there is you're going to meet these folks and thank them, put a face to the process and thank them for the gift that they've made and let them know how this impacts the potential people back in Madison and elsewhere and across the state and across the nation, and thank them for it. And I remember being really scared about doing that because, I felt like facing people at probably the worst day of their life that they never thought was coming was going to be challenging, and it was challenging. But one of the things that you learn, like doing the job and getting to talk to people like this over and over, is how much it impacts them, and in a way that's hard to describe. I mean, I think a lot of times these families would say things to me like, we never anticipated this was coming, but thank you for giving us an opportunity to be altruistic and to give our personal legacy. And we haven't felt like we've had a lot of choice in any of this. Like, all the news keeps coming to us and it's not what we hope to hear, but here we finally get to weigh in on something or support our loved ones' wishes and have something happen here that we felt was aligned with them and with us. And a lot of things people may not realize is how important organ donation is for families too. I think as surgeons, as physicians, we definitely know it's so life-saving for recipients. And I think it really matters for families too. And I'm saddened by the number of registry removals and that people are not having trust in the system, because I've found it to be, one of the things that sort of keeps me hopeful about humanity, is that people do things like this, on their worst day for other people. And, I just think it's real important that we think about that and the impact that some of these media stories and removals have on the broader discipline of organ donation and transplant both.
I agree with everything Dr. Neidlinger said. The spirit of these donor families, there is an incredible healing power in donation. And to see the donation teams and the hospital teams just surround these families with support and love during these very difficult moments, to coordinate honor walks so the families can feel this respect and gratitude for the decision they've made. It's really humbling to hear families in the middle of the very darkest moments just take so much peace and comfort in knowing that their loved one will live on, that their loved one will prevent another family from feeling the loss that they're feeling. And so when these registry removals are occurring at this record pace, it's robbing people of the healing power that donation has. And that is just another tragedy, that these transplant recipients will not get a second chance because of this. But also these families that are suffering loss and grief of a loved one will not have that healing power that donation has given so many others.
Yeah. Now, if you're someone who's hearing this conversation and saying, I want to be a part of the registry, how do you make that happen?
It is so important to make sure you talk to your family. When families are suffering loss and grief, it's a difficult reality. But for families to know your wishes ahead of time is a really important conversation to have. And it's a difficult conversation to have. It's personal. It's a conversation that centers around end-of-life discussion. So it's not an easy conversation to have. But the proactive conversation is very helpful when the time comes. And so we advocate for people to take time to think about what that decision is for them. It's part of your healthcare power of attorney decision-making as well. It's an important decision to proactively think about. Once you inform yourself, there's many different opportunities and different ways to sign up on the registry. When you go to the DMV to renew your driver's license, or you can sign up online with the Wisconsin Donor Registry at donatelifewisconsin.org. Those are ways that you can receive more information and also register that decision.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us here on Lake Effect and sharing your work.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Colleen McCarthy is the Vice President of Organ and Tissue Donation at Versity, Wisconsin. Dr. Nicole Neidlinger is a transplant surgeon and medical director at UW Organ and Tissue Donation.
You can find more interviews like this one by visiting wuwm.com/Lake Effect. And while you're there, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast.